So I'll just start off with the importance of planning and why we're here. You know, a goal without a plan is just a wish. You know, we can all think about what we want to do in 2019, but actually if we put nothing in place, nothing to measure against, then, you know, it is a wish. You know, and the reality is, if you don't know where you want to be in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months time, how do you actually know whether you're going to achieve it? How do you ever know whether you're on track or off track? How do you know whether you need to fix something? So, you know, it's absolutely critical for you guys, for your business, you know, not your practice, your business, to actually think and to plan ahead and to know what needs to happen. So, I talk about golden rules, and this is one of them. So, avoiding the scattergun approach, okay? One of the things that I see practices do quite often is they will try a few things. They'll say, well, you know, I've done an email newsletter, I've posted on social media for a week, I did a letterbox drop, and nothing works for me. Okay, so they'll try everything and nothing works. The reality is that you need consistency with your marketing for it to work. So whatever you do, you need to be consistent. It takes between 6 to 11 times for a message to sink in. You know, and that is a marketing message, but that's also probably a message to your team. If you think about it, how many times you have to tell, you know, members of your team to do something. 6 to 11 times across the board, okay? Your patients are no different. So if you've done a letterbox drop once, and you've sent one email newsletter and it doesn't work, can you see why? It wouldn't work. You have to be consistent. You know, and think about it, how many times are you actually communicating with your patients? Hey, come in. You know, you've got to be consistent. So whatever you do with your marketing, make sure that you're doing it in a consistent manner. And I will talk about that on, you know, bang on and on and on about that throughout this evening. So there was a practice, North Shore, that I spoke to about 6 months ago, and they said exactly this: nothing is working for me. And I said, okay, tell me about nothing working. And they said, well, you know, we had our website built 2 years ago by an Indian company, but actually we haven't been able to contact them since it went live, and we have no idea how to change it or to even log in. So it's completely out of date. You know, is it a surprise that that's not working? Not really. SEO, they said, yeah, we're doing some SEO. I'm like, great, what are you doing? I don't know. What are you paying for? I don't know. Hey. You know, and they had no idea what they were paying for. There was no reporting, there was no conversation. So they were paying for something but couldn't track it. Pay-per-click, so they were doing Google AdWords, but again, they weren't sure whether it was working or not. They didn't know whether the patients that were phoning were coming through their Google AdWords or not. Again, is it any surprise that that doesn't work? Social media, patient's wife was doing it, and I said, great, you know, what are the goals in place? What are you trying to achieve? What's she doing every week? Posting. You know? So this practice is doing so much in theory, but none of it is being tracked. None of it has a direction. None of it has goals. Does that make sense? My favourite part was they had a website listing in the US. So it was a website for dentists in the US that some genius salesperson had sold them. And I'm like, why on earth are you listing your practice on the North Shore of Sydney on a website in the US? I don't know. It seemed like a good idea. And I'm like, it seems like a good idea. They were running newspaper ads and they had the same ad for the last 2 years. They hadn't changed it. There was nothing in there to track. Okay? And they were not marketing to their existing patients. They had no communication beyond the 6-monthly postcard. Okay? So you may think that you're busy and you may think that you're doing lots of marketing, but honestly, if you are not tracking and you're not measuring, you don't have a plan, then it's never going to work. So for your marketing to win, for it to be successful, is you need to make sure that you have thoughts behind it and a strategy. You need to be consistent. Okay, so whatever you do, make sure that you are doing it in a consistent manner. And don't expect instant results. You know, it takes time to build a brand. Something that we're seeing at the moment with practices, given the environment that we're in and the competitive nature, is I'm getting practices that are desperate, truly desperate, phoning saying, I need patients and I need them now. And the people that need patients and need patients now are the ones that are going to buy things that they don't need and don't want out of desperation, because there is nothing that can go instant. You know, turn on the tap, here's some instant patients. Okay, so just be really aware there is no quick fix. Okay, so 2018, I just want to spend a small amount of time looking at what happened in 2018 for you guys. I know that you got sent out some pre-work. I don't know whether you've done it. Anybody? Yay! No. No? That's okay. We will spend a few minutes going through. You can pop some numbers down, you can guess, and won't it be interesting to go back to the practice tomorrow and actually see how accurate your guesses are. So I want you to think about what worked, you know, what didn't work, and what needs to be changed. You know, at the end of the year, if you can actually say this is what worked, then isn't that great? You can go to the team, you know, this is what's working, we've addressed these issues, we know that this isn't working. You know, it gives people a great feeling to know that, you know, you're in control of last year and this year. So numbers. Who here, honestly, is tracking their annual revenue? Beautiful. Against a goal? Okay. Marketing expenditure? Anybody know what they're tracking? Anybody know what they should or could be spending? Okay, we will fix this. Number of active patients. Who are watching these numbers? Good. Well done. New patients per month? Okay, that's good to see some nods. So what we do when we do consulting with practices is we probably look at about 30 numbers, okay? And we will sit down every quarter with those practices and drill deep and look at the numbers and analyze those numbers. What I'm doing with you guys tonight is giving you, you know, the absolutely critical ones, okay? So what I'm telling you tonight is what we tell our consulting clients, and you know, please listen to what I'm saying. Please go back into the practice. Please look at these numbers and please track them, because in 12 months' time, you're going to have a much clearer view of your practice and what needs to change if you do. So the first exercise, and if you haven't done your pre-work, this is an interesting exercise. I actually want you to write down what you think or what you know are your annual revenue goals, your marketing expenditure, average number of active patients, average number of new patients, okay? If you don't know these numbers, have a guess, okay? Because I actually think that if you went back tomorrow and you actually looked at these real numbers and you pulled them out of your systems, I think it would be an eye-opener to actually say, hey, yeah, we know where we're at, this is good, or we have no idea, we need to look at these numbers. So spend a couple of minutes, write them down, and then, you know, gut feel. Are you happy with where you're at this year, you know, with the performance of your practice? You know, it's okay, or are you not happy? Do things need to change? So just spend a couple of numbers, a couple of minutes and write down some numbers. And in the seminar on Monday in Melbourne, people said, okay, I don't actually know where to find these numbers. So if you don't, your revenue numbers and your marketing expenditure, you should be able to pull straight out of your accounting software. Okay, so they should be pretty easy to pull out. Active patient numbers and new patient numbers, again, should be through your practice management software. So these are high-level reports that you should be able to pull out. So, you know, it literally should take you, in theory, 5 minutes to be able to pull these numbers out on a monthly basis. So what we do with practices is we will look at this rolling number. So we'll look at it on a quarterly basis. In fact, we look at it we review it on a quarterly basis, but a rolling number on a monthly basis. Okay, so we'll have October, November, December and we'll see what the data is looking like. You know, same with active patient numbers, new patients. We will look at it on a rolling basis. We'll look on a monthly basis, or we'll track on a monthly basis, review on a quarterly basis. So what we are hearing, the goal should be 1 patient per day, per working day, per dentist.
1 patient, all right.
Okay, so 20 per month for every dentist, approximately. Is that what everybody else considers as a realistic?
I was hearing 17 or...
Yeah. So good rule of thumb is 1 patient, 1 working day, 1 dentist, which is almost 17. Okay. Anybody struggle with the fact that they're not even sure what their numbers are?
What's the lifetime value?
I will. It's on the slides.
Oh, yeah, right.
Stay with it. Okay. All happy to go ahead? What is the average lifetime value of a patient? Good question. The reason this is one of the critical numbers out of all the numbers we talk about with our practices is if you know how much a patient is worth to your practice, you're empowered to know how much you could spend to acquire a new patient. True? And if you know how much a new patient is worth, or a patient is worth, would you be in control of, okay, well, this is what we need to do to keep them into the practice and stop them going to our competitors? So it's an absolutely critical number for practices to think about when it comes to their marketing. So there was a practice over in WA that we did this exercise with, and I think it was $23,000 was the value that they worked out. Practice owner went, crikey, $23,000, you know, that's, you know, I'm going to spend so much time and effort on keeping the patients in. Practice manager went, $23,000, does that mean I can have an increased marketing budget? But they knew that if $23,000 is what is potentially walking through that door, or is potentially phoning up for the first time, does that make a difference to the team? You know, and if you have somebody that's answering the phone that isn't really that great, you know, would it focus the mind and say, whew, every phone call that that person answers is potentially losing me $23,000. So can you see why this is a really important number? So the exercise is in the book, and it is one to take home and do, but I really do recommend that you think about this. So some of the things that go into the calculation is, you know, how long on average, and it is averages on averages, but how long on average does a patient stay with you? You know, if you are in the middle of the Sydney CBD, it's probably going to be a lot less than if you are in country New South Wales. Nature of the beast. You know, how much on average they spend a year, okay? And then something that's often forgotten about is the referral base. Because if you have, you know, a high number of referrals in your practice, then this needs to come into the calculation. And what we see, and then obviously the spend of those referrals. So that is what an average lifetime value of a patient is. And we see it from as low as 17,000 to 35-ish. So there's quite a range. And depending on your practice, depending on the location, it will be somewhere within that range typically. But a really, really worthwhile exercise to go back and do. And all of the steps are in whichever page it says, page 39 in the book. So I do recommend you take some time out and do it. I really do. It's an averaging of an average. This is where you kind of sit down and go, you know, who is our average kind of person? Will they come in every 6 months for a checkup? Will they come in, you know, once a year? You know, average on average. What will they then, on average, and I know it's averages, what would they spend? Would they, you know, are we an implant practice, or are we, you know, just a mum and pop practice around the corner? You know, what is it that they would then buy on average? You know, and this is where you can pull the numbers from your practice management software and see and actually get really accurate with these numbers. But, you know, it's a gut feel. You know, it's not every patient is worth $17,000 or $23,000, but on average, this is how much they're worth. And then with that, you can then say, okay, you know, how can we increase this average? Or how can we increase the number of inquiries to people actually in the chair? You know, and if somebody comes to you and says, hey, we're going to offer you a great deal to advertise in Vogue magazine, most ridiculous, you know, thing I can think of, you can say, well, I know that, you know, every patient is worth $35,000, so can I do that? Is it worth it? Are these the kind of right people? Does that make sense? Yes. Okay. So on every course, I talk about the basics, okay? Tonight's basics are making you think about your practice, okay? And going right back to the basics of your practice and thinking about why you're in business, you know, what you care about, and thinking about your patients, thinking about your competition. Okay, it's absolutely critical, I believe, for you to go back to this given the competitive environment. You know, you can only be you. Nobody here is from a corporate, are they? Or would admit to it? So, in this competitive environment, the corporates cannot be you. The corporates cannot be the local practice. Okay, you cannot be the corporate, but they cannot be you. So really identifying your why and really identifying who your ideal patient is going to help you position yourself against those corporates. If you are generic, if you're vanilla, if you are just a dental practice, it's going to be much harder to compete in this environment. You know, if you don't know what makes you different, and if you don't know who you're trying to attract, how do you start marketing? You know, how do you decide where you're going to market and what you're going to say and what people care about? You need to go back to the absolute basics, which is why this course is a good one as a refresher from the previous two, but also a great one to start the other courses next year, because, you know, going back to basics is critical for every practice, you know, and obviously what makes you different. Why should they come to you and not the other practices in your suburb? So you'll get a copy of these slides, and I do recommend that you sit down as a practice and do this. And there are more questions in the book. But, you know, think about you if you are the practice owner. You know, what do you actually want out of your business? What do you want out of your practice personally? You know, do you want to be working 7 days a week, or do you want to work 2 days and spend the rest of them on the golf course? You know, what do you love doing and what do you hate doing? Because if you're drilling and filling and you hate that, and you want to move into injectables, which is a practice down in Melbourne that was there on Monday, you know, why are you drilling and filling? Okay, so actually what you love should reflect where you want to focus the practice. Okay, likewise, what you hate doing, stop talking about it. You know, take it off your website. Okay, you know, what do you believe in, what makes you different, and then obviously where do you want the practice to be in 5, 10, 15 years? And how do you then position yourself and the practice to reach those goals? So, you know, take the time, do the review, think, you know, strategically and long term about your practice and see what makes you different. Likewise, has anybody created an avatar for their ideal patient? Okay, so let's just say that you want to attract young families. Okay, if you've done the avatar and you know who they are and what they want to, you know, what they care about from your services, their income, you know, where they're located, would you therefore, for young families, when the local seniors paper rings you up and offers you a great deal, are you going to sign up to the seniors paper? I hope not. Okay? There's a practice in Sydney CBD that phoned me up and she said, I've been given an amazing opportunity to advertise on the radio to the whole of New South Wales. And I'm like, okay. You know, for her avatar, who do you think these people are? Do you think they're in the whole of New South Wales listening to that radio station? Or do you think they're sitting on the train on their iPhones, never listening to this radio station in their lives? You know, so what she thought was a really great deal actually was the opposite. So if you can create an avatar of who your ideal patient is, who you want to attract to the practice, you can then start getting into their mindset and thinking about what they care about for your services. You know, if it is the young families, you know, do they care whether you've got a Netflix, you know, on the screen, on the ceiling? I'm guessing they do. Okay. Do they want you to be open at the weekend? Probably, because they want to be able to fit it in around school hours. Okay. Likewise, if you're trying to get high net worth individuals, maybe you would think about sponsoring something at the golf course. Okay, empty nesters. You know, you've got to think about who you are trying to attract. Draw a picture, you know, give them a name. Because if you can give them a name, we've got a practice that's got, theirs is Ava. And they go, and they're talking about marketing. It's like, well, would Ava care about that? You know, would Ava care that we've got a new OPG? Well, what do we need to say to Ava so she understands this? Okay? Does Ava care about payment plans? Does she need payment options? And if you can have your avatar or avatars, it means that the decisions in your practice, because you're thinking about a patient, become one step easier. Does that make sense? So go through the exercise, create one or more avatars, because you may have different ones. You might have, we want to attract high net worth individuals and families, or young professionals, but create the avatar. I'll send you the slides, go through the exercise. Okay? You know, and think about what's important, and then think about what makes you different. Is that okay? Everybody happy to go back and do some homework? I should ask you to raise your hands, because you're on camera. Okay, competition, just a bit more about competition, okay? Because planning for 2019 means that you need to think about how you are competing and what you need to do to differentiate yourself. You know, we've talked about this, the oversupply, the corporates, preferred providers, okay? Overseas dentists. But have you actually thought about whether your competition is actually not competition, it's oversupply or under demand? You know, the stats show that if people came to the dentist at least once a year, then there would be a requirement for 42,000 dentists in Australia. Oversupply, under demand. Okay, is it that we don't have too many dentists? We actually have too few patients, too few active patients. And then the other one is the luxury goods providers, you know. Are your competition, you know, the people around the corner, or are they the Apple or the cruise providers or the expensive handbags and shoes? You know, it's a discretionary spend. How many people are buying the latest iPhone and they haven't had their implant? Hell of a lot. Okay, and are you going through your database? Do you actually know how many outstanding treatment plans have you got? You know, do you know who they are? Are you talking to them individually? Oversupply, under demand. Are they making the choice to go on the cruise holiday and not come back for their merit implant? And I just want to share something that I believe everybody needs to know about. So 6 weeks ago, there was an event in Sydney, a closed event, and it was an investor event and it was, the title was The Future of the Australian Dental Industry. Closed door event with the corporates. So the dental corporates were in the room for the first time in history, in Australian history. And I was there. I got the lucky golden ticket to kind of balance out the room. So what you have and what you can have is a little table that, again, we use with our consulting clients, where we get our consulting clients to track. So track your competition, okay? See what they're doing. Just be aware, and it can be a member of your team or members of your team that can do this, but just on a monthly basis or even on a quarterly basis, just, you know, take your head out, have a look around, see what's happening, make a conscious effort to see what's going on in your suburb, okay? Because you don't want to be left behind. You don't want to be the practice that's lost a lot of their patients because somebody around the corner is marketing in a certain way and you had no idea, okay? If you just make this part of your year, then you're going to be one step ahead.